It's the first of the month, and Linda sits at her kitchen table with a coffee gone cold, doing math nobody warned her about. Her Social Security landed this morning, $1,900, same as last month, same as next to a Medicare letter that just nudged her Part B premium up again and the grocery coupons. In her head is last week's headline: the average retiree supposedly has $600,000. Linda worked 41 years, raised 2 kids, never missed a payment. She looks at her own balance, about $110,000, and quietly wonders where she went wrong. Here's the thing, Linda, you didn't go wrong. That average retiree in the headline doesn't exist. My name is Nick, and today we're breaking down the real money stats of the average American retiree in 2026. The actual numbers, not the headline. If you're nowhere near retirement, don't click away. This is the trap being built for you. And by the end, you'll never trust the word average again. So let's start with the number that ruined Linda's morning, because it's technically true, and that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. If you take every household in America headed by someone aged 65 to 74 and average out their retirement accounts, you do get a big, reassuring number, around $609,000. That's the average retiree has over 600 grand headline. It's real. It's also one of the most misleading statistics in all of personal finance. Here's why. Picture a small neighborhood bar on a Tuesday night. 10 regulars nursing beers, nobody in the room worth more than 50 grand. Then Jeff Bezos walks in and sits at the end of the bar. If a reporter burst in and announced the average net worth in this room is now $2 billion, he'd be technically right. And that number would tell you absolutely nothing about anyone actually sitting there. That's what an average does. A few very wealthy retirees walk into the data set, and suddenly everyone's average looks fantastic. So we throw the average out and we look at the median instead. The person standing exactly in the middle, where half of retirees have more and half have less. And that number for that same 65 to 74 group is not $600,000, it's $200,000. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent survey of consumer finances, the typical retiree in that age band has about $200,000 saved. The average was 3 times higher than the reality. Bezos was sitting at the bar the whole time. And look, $200,000 still sounds like a lot of money until you actually try to retire on it. There's a rule of thumb called the 4% rule. The idea that you can safely pull about 4% of your savings each year without running the well dry. 4% of $200,000 is $8,000 a year. That's about $667 a month. That's your nest egg. Decades of saving, and it spins off roughly 1 car payment a month. And remember, that's the median, which means half the retirees in that group are working with even less. And if you're thinking the workplace 401k rides to the rescue here, the brokerage's own data tells on itself. Fidelity loves to announce how many 401k millionaires it has, a few 100,000 of them, which sounds amazing until you remember tens of millions of people own a 401k. The headline is the millionaire. The median balance is closer to $30,000. Same magic trick, different logo. Lead with the dazzling average, bury the ordinary middle where most of us actually live, which is exactly why the next number matters so much. Because if your savings only generate a few $100 a month, then the real foundation of your retirement isn't your 401k at all. It's that Social Security deposit Linda watched land this morning. So how big is that check? In 2026, after the latest cost of living bump, the average retired worker's benefit is about $2,071 a month, just under $25,000 a year. And that's the average. Linda's $1,900 doesn't even clear it. Picture what $2,000 covers in a lot of cities. That's rent on a 1-bedroom and basically nothing else. The whole check gone before groceries, before the electric bill, before a single copay. And here's where it stops being abstract and becomes the entire ballgame. For a huge share of retirees, that check isn't part of the income. It is the income. For roughly 4 in 10, Social Security is the majority of what they live on. For about 1 in 7, it's 90% or more. Not 90% of the fun money, 90% of everything. Now, here's the part nobody brings up at parties. That foundation has a crack in it. The trust fund behind these benefits is, by the program's own trustees, projected to run short around 2033. If Congress does nothing, and Congress does nothing is historically a strong bet, the program could only pay about 77% of scheduled benefits, not zero, but an automatic, roughly 23% pay cut landing on the people who can least absorb it. For a typical couple, that's around $16,500 a year, and the worker who turns 59 this year hits full retirement age right about when it's scheduled to land. So let's add this up from Linda's side of the table. A median nest egg throwing off a few hundred a month, a social security check averaging $2,000 with a haircut penciled in for the next decade. And against all of that, the cost of, actually being alive for another 20 or 30 years, which raises the obvious question, how much were people supposed to have? This is where it gets almost darkly funny, because we actually know that number. People will tell you themselves. Every year, Northwestern Mutual asks Americans what their magic number for a comfortable retirement is, and the most recent answer was $1.26 million. That's the target. That's what people, in their own words, say it takes to do this right. Now hold that 1.26 million up next to reality. The median household approaching retirement, that's the 55 to 64 group, people in the final stretch, has about $185,000 saved. So the typical near retiree is sitting on roughly 1/7 of what they themselves believe they need. Not half, not a third, a seventh. Imagine training your whole career for a marathon, showing up on race day knowing full well it's 26 miles and having enough gas in the tank for about 4. You know the distance. You were just never handed the fuel. And I really want to be clear about something, because this is the part the personal finance internet gets wrong constantly. This is not a story about 100 million Americans being lazy or stupid or buying one too many lattes. That same survey found more than half of Americans think it's likely they'll outlive their savings. They are not in denial. They can see the gap perfectly well. They just can't close it on the wages the system actually pays. So let's please retire the idea that the problem here is willpower. And I know what some of you are thinking, because I'd be thinking it too. Okay, Nick, but I save more than most people. I'm above average. Maybe you are. But notice who's standing at the top of that average, quietly dragging it up. Bezos thought he was above average too. Everyone on the high end does. That's the trick of a meme. It whispers to almost everybody that they're fine right up until the month the math stops agreeing. The only number that can't flatter you is your own, which is exactly why it's the one worth running. And here's the cost of hiding behind an average that never makes the headline. It doesn't just hide the rich guy at the end of the bar, it buries the people getting hit the hardest. Take gender. Women tend to earn less over a career, take more time out of the workforce caring for kids and aging parents, and then have the sheer audacity to live longer. A smaller pile of money stretched over more years. Linda, by the way, is sitting right in the middle of that sentence. A woman, a thinner cushion, a longer life to cover with it. Women are far more likely to lean on Social Security for 90% of their income, and they're the ones who end up needing long-term care the longest. Or take the racial wealth gap, which in retirement isn't a gap so much as a canyon. The typical white household holds several times the retirement savings of the typical black household. Same country, same decades of work, wildly different starting blocks. So every time you hear the average American retiree has 600 grand, let a little alarm go off. Average compared to whom, pulled up by whom, because the closer you look, the more that one tidy, reassuring number turns out to be a group photo where you somehow can't make out a single face. And we still haven't gotten to the bill that mugs people in the parking lot on the way out, healthcare. Here's a figure that should be printed on the inside of every retirement brochure. According to Fidelity's most recent estimate, a single 65-year-old retiring today should expect to spend around $172,500 on healthcare over the course of retirement. For a couple, double it, about $345,000. And just to make sure that one lands, $172,000 is not the comfortable nest egg. It's not the travel fund, it's the medical bill for one person. It is also more than 6 times the median retirement balance of someone 75 and older. The healthcare tab all by itself can swallow the entire life savings and then come back for seconds. And the genuinely cruel part, that figure does not include long-term care. It doesn't count the nursing home, the assisted living, the memory care unit. And someone turning 65 today has roughly a 70% chance of needing some version of that care before they're done. A private room in a nursing home now runs well north of $100,000 a year, more than most of these people earned while they were working. So the math goes fully surreal. The median 75-year-old has $130,000 to their name. A bit more than Linda has, actually, sitting directly across the table from a service that can cost 120 grand a year. One bad health year and the entire life savings is simply gone. And here's the kicker. Most people have no idea it's coming. Ask Americans what they think healthcare will cost them in retirement, and the typical guess is around $75,000, less than half the real number. So a whole generation is walking toward a $170,000 bill while budgeting for 75. That's not a rounding error. That's planning for a rainstorm and getting a hurricane, and nobody interrupts your programming to warn you this one's coming. This, by the way, is the Medicare letter in Linda's other hand. Her Part B premium just went up again, and it climbed faster than her cost of living raise did, which means even as her Social Security check technically grows, the slice that's actually hers quietly shrinks. The raise giveth, and the premium taketh away. And against all of that, you'd at least hope retirees were walking in debt-free. Reader, they are not. The image we all carry around, the retiree who burned the mortgage decades ago and owns everything free and clear, is increasingly a fantasy. More than 4 in 10 households headed by someone 65 to 74 are now carrying credit card debt, and a growing share are dragging a mortgage across the finish line too. And this is not the fun kind of debt. It's not people financing a boat. Survey after survey finds older Americans charging groceries, utilities, and medical bills necessities because a fixed income simply doesn't stretch to the end of the month. And the credit card does not care that you're retired. There's no senior discount on 22% interest. That debt compounds against a Social Security check that grows maybe 2 or 3% a year. So the balance sprints while the income strolls. That's not a speed bump. That's a treadmill set to a speed you can't walk off. Okay, so if the savings fall short, and Social Security is a thin 2 grand with a haircut coming, and healthcare is a 6-figure ambush, you are probably thinking the exact thing almost everyone thinks at this point. Fine, I'll just work longer. Problem solved. I really wish that worked. Here's the trouble. When you survey workers, around 3/4 say they plan to keep earning money in retirement. When you survey actual retirees, only about 1/3 of them manage to, and the canyon between those two numbers is where a whole lot of retirement plans quietly go to die. The median worker says they'll retire at 65. The median retiree actually stops at around 62, 3 years early, and those 3 years are usually not a victory lap. Because when you ask the people who retired earlier than planned why, the answers are brutal. In the most recent survey, roughly 4 in 10 left because of a health problem or a disability. Another big chunk got pushed, a layoff, a buyout, a company reorganization that, funnily enough, tends to start with the oldest, most expensive employees. Stack it all up, and the large majority of early retirements happen for reasons completely outside the person's control. Just work longer is a plan that quietly depends on your body, your employer, and the entire economy, all choosing to cooperate with you in your 60s. That is not a plan. That's a wish wearing a plan's clothing. And here's the deeper thing, the part that actually explains this whole video. 2 generations ago, a regular private sector worker had a real shot at a pension, a guaranteed monthly check for life that your employer was on the hook for. Back in the early 1980s, something like 6 in 10 private workers covered by a plan had that kind of guaranteed pension. Today, it's somewhere around 4%. The guaranteed leg of the stool didn't wobble. It got sawed clean off and replaced with a 401k, which is a very polite way of saying the risk got quietly transferred off the company's balance sheet and onto your kitchen table. The same kitchen table Linda is sitting at right now, with her cold coffee, doing the math her employer used to do for her. And look, if there's one single thing this whole picture should hammer home, it's that betting your entire future on one employer and one account to carry you for 30 years is a fragile, fragile bet, whether that retirement is 30 years off or already sitting at your kitchen table. That's a big part of why I run a school community where I show people how to build a faceless YouTube channel into an income stream they actually own. The kind that doesn't wait on a pension that no longer exists or a benefit check somebody in Washington might trim. The link's down in the description. Younger and trying to get ahead of all this, or older and just wanting a little income that isn't tied to your old boss, either way, come hang out. No pressure. The video keeps rolling regardless because I don't want to leave you sitting in the dark at the table with Linda. There are things on this list you genuinely cannot control, and a few you absolutely can. You can't single-handedly fix the trust fund, but you can be deliberate about when you claim. One analysis of tens of thousands of retirees found that claiming Social Security at the wrong moment, usually too early, costs the typical person something like $180,000 in lifetime benefits they were fully entitled to. Same worker, same work history, different start date, 6 figures of difference. That decision is yours, and it deserves to be treated like the enormous financial event it actually is. You can't make healthcare cheap, but you can use the one account practically built for this exact fight, the HSA, which goes in untaxed, grows untaxed, and comes out untaxed for medical costs. It's the closest thing the tax code has to a cheat code, and most people use it as a slightly fancier checking account. And you can't go back and start saving at 25, but you can refuse to walk into retirement still feeding a 22% credit card, because wiping that out is a guaranteed 22% return, which beats what the stock market promises anybody. And above all, you can do the one thing Linda never got handed. Actually know your number, not the headlines, yours. What you'll truly need after Social Security, after any pension, to live the life you actually want. Which brings us right back to that kitchen table, the cold coffee, the bank app, the Medicare letter still sitting next to the grocery coupons, Linda staring at $110,000 that refuses to match the headline, wondering where she went wrong. Here's what I'd tell her, and what I'll tell you. You are comparing yourself to a person who does not exist. The average retiree with 600 grand is Jeff Bezos perched at the end of the bar, dragging everybody's number up while telling you absolutely nothing about your real life. The actual typical retiree is living on a $1,900 check and a nest egg that, run honestly, throws off about 1 extra coffee a day, plus a quiet, unglamorous kind of toughness that the statistics never bother to measure. So if today landed heavy, I want you to sit with this instead. None of these numbers are a verdict on you. They are a map of a system that pulled the pension, handed you the risk, and then had the nerve to call you irresponsible for being nervous about it. You do not have to be the average. The average is a ghost. You're a real person sitting at a real table who can run real numbers, and that honestly already puts you miles ahead of almost everyone who ever scrolled past that headline and just believed it. So go find your number, not the headlines. Yours. I'm Nick. I'll see you in the next one.